Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining me, Jen the Taxidermy Witch. We are live and we are reading this very popular book, sold out all around the world, apparently, in different countries. It's by Jake Richards. It's called Backwoods Witchcraft. It's quickly climbing to be one of my favorite books. And so, since it's so popular and since it's sold out, at least for now around the world, I thought that I would do a kindness to myself and to you guys. The kindness to myself is to read this book from start to back, which I'm not usually one to do, but read it chapter by chapter in an audiobook for you guys so that you can listen to it. Can someone tell me, am I buffering? I stopped the last video and we're going to restart because I wanted to see if I was buffering, and I was. Seems to be a little bit better on my end. Hello and welcome everyone. We're going to get started in a minute. The first chapter is called These Roots Run Deep, Terrain and Culture in Appalachia. No, it seems all fine. Thank you, Lizzie. I super appreciate that. Thank you. So, if you've not seen my channel before, welcome. I've also done 2 other books chapter by chapter. It was quite a long time ago, but you could look them up. I've done this book by Star Casas, Old Style Conjure, Hoodoo, Rootwork, and Folk Magic. You would just search those words and then the Taxidermy Witch and it would pop up chapter by chapter. And I've also read this book by Hoodoo Sun Moise. It's called Working Conjure, chapter by chapter on my channel. As well as finally Hoodoo by Monique Joignier Selbeck. So that one chapter by chapter on my channel. And those were uploaded videos, so there's no interruptions from the live stream. Which I will attempt to do my best, at least while I'm doing the reading through the chapters. So I need to wait until a moderator gets here, and then we'll be ready to start. We could probably start with that one. So here we go. The reason why we're learning about the terrain and culture first, he explains, because I just did, in the video before this, I read the foreword, the preface, and the introduction. And in the introduction it talks about how it's important to learn the terrain and the culture first so that you understand how the magic developed. So we seem to be good and not buffering as well, so that's fantastic. If that changes, you guys, please do let me know in big caps. Mods, let me know. Alright, here we go. These roots run deep, terrain and culture in Appalachia. The Appalachian mountain range, as it currently exists, begins at the Belle Isle, just off the coast of Labrador, north of Newfoundland in Canada, and stretches to Cheaha Mountains in Alabama, spelled Cheaha. These hills are thought to be around 500 million years old. For some context, the Himalayas are just about 40 million years old. So that's amazing. Himalayas are 40 million. Appalachian Mountains, here in the US, 500 million years old. This would make Appalachian Mountains the second oldest mountain range in the world. So, more things have occurred in these hills than you could shake a stick at. What's left of living memory regarding the tales of this highland stand true to that as well. From the times of the old villages of the Cherokee to the Civil War battlefields where flesh met gun, history and superstition have always danced around each other. The cultural boundaries of Appalachia are more so to the middle and southern regions of the mountain chain. The Appalachia that I know best spans 5 states, and now I wanted to ask anyone, does anyone want to guess the 5 states since we're on a live stream? There's 3 folks here right now, we've just started, but I suggest you all give a guess to the 5 states. Now 2 of the mods who are here, they're from the UK. So I don't know if they'll be able to guess, but Ricky Bunce, a mod who just showed up, should be able to guess the US ones, at least give a go. So does anyone want to guess those 5 states before I say them, and then we'll get back to the Richards and reading. Catskills is up in New York, upstate New York. I just learned that this morning. That's so funny because I was oh god, that's so funny. I was watching a documentary. Good guess, Uncle Badger. Okay, Ricky, go ahead and give a guess since you're from the U.S., and then we'll move along. I don't blame you for not knowing states. Okay, she says Pennsylvania, Maryland, Virginia, Alabama. One more. I do not know them all before I got this book. Oh, right, Madame Butterfly has the book and she's reading along, but... Alright, so the 5 states are Tennessee, Kentucky, North Carolina, Virginia, and West Virginia. Now, I've been to Virginia, but in particular, I've not been to... Oh, I've been to West Virginia and Virginia because I was doing this, like, class trip to our state, our country's capital, you know, Washington, D.C. And we went over to, like, the Virginias and stuff to see, I think, Mount Vernon was in the Virginias, and I know we saw it, but I don't know what state it was in. And then also the whole, like, Ford's Theater where John Wilkes Booth shot Abraham Lincoln. We saw that. I was young, though. I'm not good with geography either, you guys. Oh, good, you guessed Carolinas. You got it. You have been to Arlington Cemetery in Virginia. I have as well because it was part of my class trip. I was so happy to stand in front of that humongous Abraham Lincoln statue, which if you guys are watching the show Handmaid's Tale, they just did this thing where it was torn. Oh, gosh. Anyway. All right. Continuing with the reading. Sorry that we got off there. So the states are Tennessee, Kentucky, North Carolina, Virginia, and West Virginia. But the Appalachia, far beneath us, spans oceans. No, really. When the mountains first formed, during the time of Pangaea, they covered half the world. When the land of Pangaea broke apart, it carried remains of this mountain chain across the globe, forming the mountains of the British Isles, the Scottish Highlands, Scandinavia, and the Little Atlas mountain range of Morocco. This may explain why Scottish and Irish immigrants felt so at home here. They really just moved from one end of the mountain range to the other. Now, the first section in this chapter is called Appalachian Weather and Seasons. So we'll be talking about those next. Okay. The Appalachian Mountains influence a range of weather patterns and seasons, which the old folk counted on as signs to ensure good harvest. Spring here is filled with a confusion of rain and sunshine. We often have what the Cherokee called false springs. The weather will warm up, it'll rain, and all the snow will be gone. Then, come the next week, we might be under a few feet of snow. The valleys of the mountains protect us from most of the hazardous weather sent our way, such as tornadoes and bad blizzards in the winter. The mountaintops take the brunt of most of that and give us a storm weaker than it might have been. Bears who gave birth in January now led their cubs out from their caves for the first time to forage on berries and plants and to their system and get their system up and going. Come the first few nights of spring rain, Male salamanders make their way across the forest floor to the vernal pools. I think salamanders were big in folk magic because I've read it a couple of times in this book while flipping through the book. Where the females, come the first few nights in the spring rain, male salamanders make their way across the forest floor to the vernal pools, where the females will soon join them. Once there, a spring orgy begins to ensure the next generation. And I don't think he's being funny. I think that's honestly how salamanders get their stuff done. They just have this, like, orgy. Like, everybody gets together and then mates. Water from these pools, from the dark pool, is excellent in fertility work. Yeah, absolutely. If you're lucky enough to go at the right time. Annually, we have what Tennessee lore names Little Winters, which foreshadow the approaching end of the cold season. There will be frequent drops in temperature that last a couple of days to a couple of weeks, followed by spring blooms of specific plants. The folks here talk about little winters just like summer and fall because they are seasons to us. The first little winter occurs, and if you guys are from there, please say right now in the live stream, like if you can join into this little winters, little summers conversation, or if you're watching this after it's live, please say in the comments if you can contribute to us knowing a little bit more about this perhaps, or if you've experienced it and what's your favorite time of it and all of that. I'm interested. The first little winter occurs in early April and is called rebud winter. As this is the time that the first little winter occurs in early April and is called red bud winter. This is the time that the red bud trees have stepped up on mountain stage. Superstition says that Judas was hanged from a red bud. And another tale says that if you stick a pocket knife in the tree on August 21st, the tree will die. In late April comes dogwood winter, like the dogwood right outside of my window. Beautiful in late April. So late April comes dogwood winter, when the dogwood trees are in bloom for a short period that ends their petals covering lawns like snow. Oh yeah, I mean they completely do. I just didn't add that up to those little winters. That's cool. Any wounds acquired in dogwood winter would heal very slowly and may even scar. This is connected to the old tale that dogwood was used to make the cross from which Jesus was crucified. How many of you have heard that before? I think we did that in some readings when we were reading about dogwood just the other day when it bloomed, and I showed you how to harvest it, and we did videos on harvesting it and drying it and what it looked like before and after, and how you can use it in your herbal workings, etc. Yes, that dogwood was beautiful. Beautiful. So, yes, this is connected to the old tale that dogwood was used to make the cross on which Jesus was crucified, though it doesn't grow naturally in Israel. The tree was cursed to shrink and become twisted so it may never be used for the purpose again. The 5 petals of the dogwood blooms represent the 5 wounds Christ suffered at the crucifixion, with each petal having a point at the end. These points, along with the crown of stamens in the center, form the crown of the thorns. I feel like I should go grab dogwood so you could see it. The representation is complete with the maroon splotch in the center, said to be the drop of Jesus' blood. Yeah, I'm going to go grab my dogwood, even though we're doing chapter reading. I apologize for those of you who want to hear an audiobook, but I would like to show the dogwood now. So like I say, there's a tree right outside of my window, and then at my mother's, she's got a different color of dogwood. But here is that flower, and my camera doesn't usually get a super sharp picture, but as you can see, the stamen in the center, all those yellow bits, they are quite lifted. And then there are 5 petals that do come to this point, and at the point there's a little, like, black edge. I'm not seeing a red drop of blood in the center of these, but let me check out the purple dogwood. Yeah, they're completely, like, folded up, rather. Let's open it up. Dried nice. There seems to be a red dot in the center of that one. So, very interesting to kind of compare the 2 different types of dogwood and see what we come up with compared to our readings. But again, this is something that you can get from my Etsy shop. Any dried herbs. I have over 300 things. The Etsy shop's down in the description, along with the Patreon. A lot of fun things to do to join up in there. So let me continue my reading. So, still talking about the dogwood. These points, along with the crown of stamens in the center, from the crown of thorns. The representation is complete with the maroon splotch in the center, said to be the drop of Jesus' blood. Dogwood root or bark, I have bark but not root, is obtained, is bound to a cross with red thread and hung in the living room for protection. Between the time dogwoods start blooming and the next new moon is the right time for farmers to plant their corn. Okay, so it would be that part of April. Carry dogwood bark or root for protection from enchantment. So, Nello, we need to add all these dogwood abilities into our Book of Shadows, okay? Thank you. I know you'll be watching this later. Between the time dogwood starts blooming and the next new moon is the right time to plant your corn. Carry dogwood bark or root for protection from enchantment, but never bring dogwood blooms into the home or burn the bark inside on the hearth. Again, this and lilac, and there are some other ones, are things you should keep, like, in your garage or, you know, out of the house in a little shed or something. I'm going to leave this on the bed, so I make sure to do that, honestly, even if I can't show it in a video again. It's not worth the, bad luck? Because it's said to bring bad luck. Yeah, let me get that and the lilac out today. Alright, next comes Locust Winter in early May. It is said that lightning strikes locust trees more often than others, and for this reason they're used to divine a future love interest. Oh, I would think a lot of energy would be in the locust tree if it is known to have lightning strike it. At this time of year, saplings are dug up from the woods and planted in the front yard of one's house. One for each potential or current lover. Each tree is named after the beloved, And the tree that thrives and grows past midsummer, it's a good note, Nello, for midsummer, is the one who truly loves you. And for those who do not, their bush will die. If more than one tree lives, the one with the thickest foliage and the sturdiest stalk is the truest love. The catch is that you cannot water the trees. They must be nourished solely by nature. Otherwise, you will favor one over the other and mess up the divination. On to page 4. Blackberry winter follows with a show of the awesome white blooms of the blackberry bush in the middle of May. An old English belief that has survived here warns that it is unlucky to eat blackberries on or after September 29th. And you know, I'm going to interject there and tell you that at least here where I'm at, and I'm not near Appalachia, I'm here in Seattle, Washington area of the United States, yeah? This big northwest corner. And the blackberries get a taste to them at some point where they're still out there, they're still developing, they're still out there, but they just don't taste good anymore. And it's honestly, it's my instinct telling me, like, if it doesn't taste good anymore, that it's not sweet, and it's not sour, and it's not anything. It just doesn't taste like anything anymore. Like, just off. They taste off. This must be the relation to that, in my opinion. So, an old English belief has survived here that warns that it is unlucky to eat blackberries after September 29th. That must have been my intuition telling me, hey, it's unlucky, don't eat it. As that's when the devil steps over the bushes with his cloven hooves. That's why it is unlucky. So, got that all, you guys? It's unlucky to eat blackberry after September 29th because that is when the devil steps over the bushes with his cloven hoofs. Wow. Those who do are said to die before the year ends. Well, I don't know about that. I didn't die, but I wasn't in Appalachia at the same time. In Scotland, it's believed that the devil spat, expectorated spit, spat on both, In Scotland, it's believed that the devil spat on the bush after landing on it from his fall from heaven. It's also said that the blackberry bush provided the thorns for Christ's crown on the cross. And many still believe the burning bush was a blackberry. The last little winter usually occurs when the whip-poor wills, whatever that is, can be heard and is named as such. This one isn't as cold as the others and rarely damages plants, but it's still cold enough to keep the winter wear out a bit longer. Some folks call it the ghost winter or phantom winter, as the outward signs of winter have vanished. While these winters are a part of folklore and ecosystem, while these winters are a part of our folklore and ecosystem, they are likely to disappear altogether as climate change worsens. During these winters, a symphony of flowers arrive to the Appalachian landscape, blooming and disappearing over and over. Folks are off to Easter dinners, getting into spring cleaning in the attics and the closets. That brisk breeze that flows through the open window and doors while Mama cleans are the best after a cold winter. Spring tonics are drunk to get one's system back on track for the warm months, and the debris of fall and winter are cleared from the gardens. Now the mountains are fully awake with life, deer stalking behind the brush, turkey vultures looking for a field feast, and foxes roaming sometimes where foxes ought not to roam. High summer comes with an abundance of corn, tobacco, squash. Folks are off to the lakes and rivers to cool off, and the mountains are lush with greenery. In high summer, I would be in the creeks catching tadpoles and minnows. I used to do stuff like that when I was a kid. Just get them in my hands and then drop them. Or up in the mountain, or in periwinkles, these little things that were on rocks. We used to catch those and let them back. I would be, in high summer, I would be in the creeks. Right, we would wade in creeks and, like, we would catch, also crawdads. Even up in here in Seattle, we have crawdads in the creeks. It's really cool. You'd have to wait and, like, wait till the water was still so you could stare down in the water. And then you had to be still so that the creature, whatever you were going to wait for, came back toward you. And sometimes you could put your hands in the water to be still so that when you went to grab it, you were closer. Anyway, so fun. Like, just when we were kids, just playing in the river and playing in the creeks and stuff. If you're a kid, be careful in rivers and creeks. They could have a stream that could catch you and take you down, and you could never be safe enough, so be careful. But yeah, that was one of my, like, funnest childhood memories, was doing stuff like that. See, I agree with you. From the Dark Pool says, I feel like a little kid again being read a bedtime story. Right, because I think it's nighttime for her right now. Alright, so yes, it would be in the creeks I would be in the creeks catching tadpoles and minnows, or up in the mountains sitting and watching a deer gaze. However, this fun was tempted by the superstitions of my mother and grandmother, especially during the dog days. No idea what that is. Which runs from July 3rd, upcoming, to August 11th, you guys. From July 3rd to August 11th, if you're wondering. That is when it is. This Mercury retrograde upcoming is messing with my speech. But I will, prevail and continue to do videos, to be honest. I will do my reading. During the dog days, which runs from July 3rd to August 11th, folks believe dogs caught rabies more at this time than any other time. Snakes were meaner, and misfortune was more apt to be found. Well, we have all known from this upcoming month, and Stargirl told us, and a lot of people have been talking about it, all of July is going to be very, very difficult this year. And your dog's birthday's on the 3rd of July. How fantastic. Hey, Brenda. So nice to see you. We're going to be reading this chapter by chapter, so we're reading chapter 1. Yay! Alrighty. Audiobooks just rock, especially when you can have a little conversation interjected. Oh, woohoo! Alrighty, here. Folks believe dogs caught rabies more at this time. Snakes were meaner, and misfortune was more apt to be found. At this time, the star Sirius moves with the sun, bringing misfortune as it goes from horizon to horizon. The tiniest cut could quickly become a dangerous infection, and you were more likely to drown. Late summer crops like tomatoes and okra had to be harvested before the animals or blight got them. What is blight, you guys? B-L-I-G-H-T. I need someone to tell me. And if no one does in the video, then in comments later. Blight. B-L-I-G-H-T. Late summer crops like tomatoes and okra had to be harvested before the animals or blight got to them. Does that mean bugs? I would guess. After the summer solstice passes, which, remember you guys, is June 21st, right there. And a blight is like a massive die-off. Oh, okay, a massive die-off. Thank you, Sam Lee, Ricky, and Freshwater. I super appreciate that. I have to stand up really quick because my feet are getting numb. I don't know what that's about, but let's stand up and do a little reading. I hear you. Okay, here we go. Okay, after the summer solstice passes and the fireflies light shows are done, nature begins to hush. Just before the autumn equinox, the corn is gathered and the tobacco is speared on the stakes. Then there's the final weeding of the garden, and the dirt is turned over with debris of the garden to fertilize the soil. This was the time that livestock was slaughtered to store up on food and to cut down the months that need fed on winter mornings, the mouths that need fed on winter mornings. The mountains became ablaze with life's last moments as animals forage and store away food for the winter. With the bear cubs long grown and a generation of salamanders past, Mother Appalachia begins shedding her garments, accompanied by rainstorms, sleeping crickets, and a show of falling leaves. Mother Mountain takes her leave for sleep, and we are all left chilled. The leaves have long been brown and will now see a time of freezing and melting before the earth accepts them back in decomposition. Most animals are hibernating, yet some brave the mountain winter. A lone deer, hog, coyote, or turkey will rummage through the bones of the forest, and Mother Mountain hides her face behind low skies. The wind is the only sound on the land. The temperature drops sometimes below zero. Branches are covered with ice, and the crows and hawks are the only citizens of the sky, foraging for those not strong enough for the cold. Then the robin heralds the first sign of spring in February, bringing with her the fire of summer painted on her chest. And remember, we learned earlier the reason the folklore behind the robin's chest being red is that the robin pulled out the blackberry thorn, the biggest one from Jesus' brow, and blood got on the robin's chest. And that is the lore that we just read in this book a little earlier. Alright, so February, bringing with her the fire painted on her chest, and the whole cycle begins again. Now the next section is called Appalachian Terrain, and then we'll be reading Appalachian History, and then Appalachian Folk Magic. This is all within Chapter 1, and those are the last sections we've got. So here we are, Appalachian Terrain, and again, if you're just kind of joining us recently, we're reading Chapter 1 out of Backwoods Witchcraft. The video before this has the preface, the introduction, and the foreword. So make sure to go check that out, but it doesn't start until about 25 minutes. We talked for a bit before. Alright, so here we go, Appalachian Terrain. The terrain of these mountains is ever-changing, due in part to our weather patterns. In some parts, the forest floor is covered in pine needles, which in other places are the grassy patches. Rocky cliffs, steep riverbanks, and mossy hills are in the mix as well. It sounds beautiful. The trees are spaced by their choosing, limbs nodding under nature's hand. Oh, great author. And the green lake waters stir only by the breeze and an occasional bass or bass or trout. I love when you catch yourself in the English language and you're like, The occasional bass or trout, those are fish here. The old folk traversed these hills in nothing more than their breeches and boots. But some of these mountains are so steep you must hold on to younger trees as you climb and pray the wood is sturdy enough to hold your weight should you slip. I often climbed Big Ridge Mountain when I was little. It was just like this until it levels out and the trees open up to show the valleys below, with the occasional free-ranging cow grazing in the distance. That's funny. The rivers are littered with boulders older than the dirt on the banks. As the water rushes past, it splashes these boulders and stones, encouraging the growth of moss and grass. The eddies, EDDIES, created by the boulders. I don't know what eddies are. If you guys do, please tell me. The eddies created by the boulders make safe places for the minnows to rest. Then I would guess it was just a natural little dip in the rock that the water kind of got up onto. I don't know. I could be wrong. EDDIES. Where are you, Jennifer? Yes. So the eddies created by boulders make safe places for minnows to rest. If you hold your feet still enough in the creeks, they'll come up and start nibbling the dead skin off. It's nature's salon. It's nature's high-end salon. People just do nothing. Then there are the fields. The original colonizers described Appalachia as the endless forest. The only fields here, prior to settling, were made by the Cherokee, who cleared trees to make room for their gardens and homes. But even the Cherokee say that there are some they didn't create, like the grassy balds, Balds, near the Roan Mountain, said to be the largest balds. What are balds, you guys? Bald mountains? I don't know. So they're said to be the largest balds in the world. They are described as being the footprints of the devil as he walked over the Blue Ridge. Right around dawn, the deer and turkeys come out to graze, and groundhogs are also a common sight. We have natural springs and pools that seem to come from another world. Eddies, small whirlpools or currents. Thank you, Joyce. Appreciate that. Joyce is from Oklahoma, but that's very close. It's a state away, pretty much, I do believe. I'm sure she's been there many times. All right, let's see here. Where are we at? I'll find it, don't you worry. I think we're about there. No, we have natural springs and pools that seem to come from another world. The people of Appalachia have always had a good relationship with water, and both the Cherokee and the Baptist baptize their children in the river. Many people spend their summers at the lakes and springs. During this heat, the animals' priority becomes water to drink, and you'll sometimes see deer mosey down to the water too, standing just a few yards away. now the next section is Appalachian history, and I think my feet feel good enough that I can sit back down. I don't really know what was going on there. That'll be alright. You're closer to the Ozarks, Joyce, than the Appalachians, but pretty much the same. That's fantastic. And the Ozarks, I'm sure, have their own complete folklore, and I'm sure Joyce will tell us that. So, Appalachian history, that's what we're on to now. And Joyce, what type of Native American Indians or not Native American Indians, what type of Native American tribes are there where you live in Oklahoma? Please do share if you know some. Okay, Appalachian history. Seattle is named after Chief Seattle, if you guys didn't know that. We have a lot of different tribes up this way as well. Now, nature and places ain't all that is in these hills. We also have a rich history, deeply woven into the birthing walls of America. I'm only speaking of the history in East Tennessee and the surrounding areas here. To include the history of all Appalachia would take more time than either of us have got. But the late 17th century, when English immigrants arrived in East Tennessee, the Cherokee had become the region's dominant tribe and had established small towns scattered about the mountains and valleys. The Cherokee are an Iroquoian-speaking, I've never heard of that, Iroquoian-speaking tribe thought to have originated in the Great Lakes region. However, another theory is that the Iroquois migrated north to their present place, while the Cherokee stayed in this proposed origin place. There's a Cherokee myth recorded in the 18th century that says that when the Cherokee first arrived here, they found moon-eyed people living in the mountains. Moon-eyed. That to me would mean that they have, like, that their eyes would be this shape. But I'm not sure. I'm only guessing. Like that their pupils would be this shape. The black of their eyes would be moon-shaped. But I don't know. Continuing on. Moon-shaped eyes. They were called moon-eyed because they couldn't see well during the day. They had white skin, blonde hair, and gray eyes. They are said to have been the creators of the pre-Columbian ruins found scattered in the hills. The Cherokee battled for the moon-eyed people, sending them westward after they were defeated. Cherokee society is traditionally matriarchal. A person's lineage is traced through their mother, and women were held in a high regard. This respect for the elderly women remains in Appalachia. Each Cherokee woman belonged to a family clan. No one could mate with someone of their same clan. Good idea. When a man wanted marriage, he would have to build a woman a house. Nello, this is interesting stuff. When a man wanted a marriage, he would have to build a woman a house. If she wanted a divorce, she would gather his things while he was out hunting and set them on the porch. Sounds like stuff people do today, like that's completely carried on, right? Guy leaves, a woman has her girlfriend over, too much wine, gets fed up, does a ritual of their own with anger, and then all the stuff is put on the porch, because, right, I don't know. It's at least what happens in movies, I don't know. If she wanted a divorce, she would gather up his things while he was out hunting and set them on the porch. She got to keep everything else, including the house and children. When this happened, the mother's uncles and brothers would fulfill the father's duties in teaching the son how to hunt, pray, and fight. The same kind of structure is the place in most Appalachian families. When immigrants began showing up in the mountains in the late 17th century, there was hostility between them and the natives. The Cherokee freely gave land to the settlers, but they wanted more, and they kept taking it and killing for it. Treaty after treaty was broken. Most white folks thought the Indian, which isn't an Indian at all, they were called Indians because the Europeans thought they were going to India. They weren't. They hit America and called them Indians. I don't know if you guys knew that. So the proper term, as far as I understand, is Native Americans, right? Some people say Native American Indians, but it's like, why would you say that? Because, you know. But I don't care what you say. I just thought it was fun to learn why they were ever called Indian in the first place. It was because of a mistake on the white man's part. Anyways, most white folks thought the Indian a barbaric animal. Others, however, were kind to the Cherokee and gladly shared the mountains. In 1830, the Indian Removal Act was enacted, and in 1838, the Cherokee Nation was forced west. This was the infamous Trail of Tears. The stories about it are still told at the International Storytelling Center in Jonesboro at the Sycamore Shoals State Park in Elizabethan. Got that all? About 17,000 Cherokee were forcibly removed. Between 2,000 and 6,000 died along the way. Most of them were moved west of the Mississippi River, but some stayed behind and hid in the grooves of the mountains. See, now that's cool. That's cool. However, if you've ever read Jack Ketchum, a little terrifying too. He built his book called Off Season was part 1, The Offspring was part 2, and The Woman was part 3. A lot of you have seen the movie The Woman. That's part 3. There's 2 steps before that. And it's all about this clan that lasted forever in caves and, didn't even speak any language. They made their own language. Like, it's nuts. And they just, moved from place to place, and they just, nuts stuff. Anyway. Alright, along we go. I was just looking at some comments there. So yes, most of them moved west of the Mississippi, but some stayed behind and hid in the grooves of the mountains. The Indian Wars, the genocide, and the removal all contributed to the loss of wisdom from the natives, their stories, annual traditions, crafts, and herbal knowledge. Eventually, the Cherokee who stayed brought back their own land. Eventually the Cherokee who stayed brought back their own land. Today, the Eastern Band of Cherokee Indians is the only tribe in America that doesn't live on a reservation. Sadly, their territory, the Quala'a boundary, has become a tourist spot for white folks, and the Cherokee wear headdress to look the part. Historically, Cherokee never wore such things. The men shaved their whole head, save for one braid in the back, usually adorned with a feather. Thankfully, not all of the Cherokee stories were lost. It's the stories that carry the spirit of a people. regardless of the traditions or techniques lost and forgotten. If the stories survive, so do the people. The Cherokee have attained a popular count, east and west of 500,000 registered people, and many are working to keep their stories and language alive. However, only about 3,000 speak their native language. And I'm going to spell that word because I have no idea how to pronounce it. If I had to try, I would say Tsalagi. Tsalagi. Tsalagi? I don't know. Now the next section and final section to Chapter 1 is called Appalachian Folk Magic, and we've got 2 pages here to read about it. Let me look at what's going on here. Yes, Amethyst Moonstone, I agree. It's so hard to know that where we're at, or at least where I'm at, was such a brutal taking. Anyway. Moving along to Appalachian Folk Magic. I love this. First sentence of the section. Appalachian Folk Magic came about because it gave these people a sense that things were going to be alright, even in the poor circumstances most found themselves in. It let them get a handle on things one way or another. And it works. I'm going to interject a personal story here. Before I knew I had endometriosis, and one time, so pain-wise, when my pain would get so bad, and this is a women's dis-ease, where you grow all these like spiderweb-like tissues all over your bladder and ovaries and fallopian tubes, and everywhere down in there, and then especially when you go into menstruation and have cramps, like, it pulls on everything, not just your ovaries, it's like every single thing. So it just, lots of things can happen there. It's a big giant infertility zone and pain zone. My grandmother had it, my mother has it, I have it. I pray my daughter somehow avoids it. I've been doing workings last 3 years for her to somehow avoid it. So anyway, I wanted to interject that when this pain would get so bad for me, and I was so young, I didn't know anything about magic. I'd always been into herbs and vegetables and close to the earth because I grew up on a farm since I was 0 till the time I was 11. And then even then we always had a garden, we just didn't have the animal bit. So I would have a cat, and sometimes, like later on in life, that I would hold and like transfer energy. A cat would make me feel better. But before I had that cat, I would sit there and I would, when nothing else worked, aspirin didn't work, prayer didn't work, nothing worked, I would start saying out loud, I feel great, I feel fine, I feel so good, I'm getting up and I'm walking, and I would just start saying this stuff. It was like, I didn't even know why I was doing it. It was like a last resort type of thing. And my body just went into it naturally. Just like when I was a little tiny girl and I just used to set up piles of flowers and vegetables and herbs and not know why, but they were like little offerings, and rocks and, just all these like interesting bits of nature. And what I'm trying to tell you here, when we're reading this part that says, it came about to give these people a sense that things were going to be alright, even in poor circumstances that they found themselves in, letting themselves get a handle on things one way or another, and it works. And honestly, the reason that I kept using that verbal affirmation of the future I wanted to have, I was using law of attraction intuitively at the age of 13, 14 for pain. And another time that I used it when I was 17, I had a urinary tract infection I didn't pay attention to. It turned into a bladder infection that turned into a kidney infection. And that time it didn't work, but that's only because I let it go way too far. But at that point, so you guys go to the doctor if you can, but at the same time, if you can't, try this. Alright, moving along. Thank you for letting me tell that story. I hope that it brought some light to maybe what some of you might have been doing naturally on your own and not ever thought about until now. So, alright, and it works. While you don't get rich quick, you can use it to better the circumstances the world sets against you, even if you're still piss poor afterward. Within it, you can foresee the cards you're about to be dealt and change the tables somewhat in your favor. Appalachian conjure was kept secret mostly from those with a suspicion and mistrust for it. And I can relate to that too, because I'm more than willing to talk about this with you if you ask me, what do you save that for? What do you dry that for? What do you do with it? Oh, you sell it on your Etsy page, but what do people do with it? Oh, energy workings with candle and... yeah, is it Christian? But once they start really, like, trying to pick me apart and looking down on me rather than up toward what I'm trying to say, it becomes something where you're defensive about, and I'm just interjecting that feeling there. It was kept a secret, mostly from those with a suspicion or a mistrust for it. Usually, the well-off church folk who sat on their own pedestal every Sunday morning, anything primitive or deemed against the good book was the devil himself. Right. If it's witchcraft and it ain't Christian, then it's the devil himself. Oh, and by the way, there can be no Christian witchcraft. What? Really? That's not true. You know, that's not true. And if you want a really good opinion on Christian witchcraft, you can ask my girl, Magical Mandy, who a lot of you know. She's a really good reference, and I do believe Ricky Bunce, who's right here in the chat, is also a Christian witch. A Christian witch. Am I wrong, Ricky? I think I heard Mandy say that in one of her videos. But I hate when people think if it's witchcraft, it's the devil himself. That's just not true. That's just a very small, narrow mind, which I have to be honest with you, until, 4 or 5 years ago, I didn't know either. I knew what Hollywood had painted for me. I started looking into things, found this out on a random, and I was like, oh, wait, I've been doing that kind of my whole life. That's kind of similar to what I've been doing. That's kind of same. And then you realize. And it's a light bulb, and it's lovely. But yes, here we go. Back to the reading. My apologies. We'll just start reading. So, yes. Anything primitive or deemed against the good book was the devil himself. Mima scrunched her nose at those people. You can go to church, to every church in Unicoi, Carter, and Washington counties, but that ain't making you right with the Lord. When the well-off folks are in trouble, they'll need someone who won't be able to get the special help they need. American folk magic is a melting pot of practices stemming from Irish, Scottish, German, Italian, and other European sources, as well as African and Native American sources. For example, the uses of different waters, like rainwater and ocean water, originates mostly from the British Isles. The use of dirts and dusts came from the Native Americans and the African slaves that brought it to this land. The act of placing bowls and pans under the beds for works, I participate in those, or spells, comes from Jewish folklore. The practice of throwing... okay, Nello, these are all really good things for the Book of Shadows. The practice of throwing spells and remnants behind oneself into a stream comes from the European traditions. The use of grave dirt comes from African and European traditions. It can be difficult to discern where methods and practices originally came from, especially with generations of change and adaptation. Some things are added or taken away based on location, timing, and need. That's why you will always find a handful of spells and recipes for the same purpose, but with varying ingredients or tools. For example, hot foot powder, which is used to make folks leave you alone or even leave town, sometimes consists of hot peppers, spices, and sulfur. And I think you need sulfur in that one. I love using sulfur in hot foot. But those things aren't found often here in the mountains, so most people mix black pepper and salt instead, as they are cheap and readily available. I've also heard of adding spiders, bugs, and other things to scare or chase folks away. I would think, too, you could add poisonous plants, you could add, because if you're adding hot things, you could add, like, sharp things, you know, thorns and cactus spikes and stuff. Monkey puzzle trees, they're so sharp. And so heat, sharp, and then poisons, why not, you know? It's just energy directing. It's just energy directing. I think it's so interesting, too, from the Dark Pool. That's why I'm reading it from front to back. I know that some people just can't get it right now, so I'm so glad to be bringing it all to you right here on the Taxidermy Witch. Guys, if you're not subscribed already and you're enjoying my content, we just do so much on this channel if you're new, but please subscribe. I checked out my analytics and it was saying that I've got 25% that aren't subscribed, so yes, please. If you enjoy, hit the like and the subscribe and the ring the bell so you can see I go on live all of the time. Back to the book. Done with the ad, back to the book. Right, so I've also heard of adding things like spiders, bugs, other things to scare and chase folks away. Be creative, in my opinion, with all your things and add it to your own touch and your own, you know, make it your own, right? It'll work better for you than copying the same exact recipe of somebody else. Making it your own and adding it or changing up a little bit will work better. It's hard to believe, I know, but not once you understand how the energy works. At first, it's hard to believe that, but it's not later on. You think, oh, what do I know? I'm just a new witch and I have no idea. You do, though. Your intuition, as soon as you learn how to listen to that and hear that before logic comes in, because it only takes like 1 second before logic comes in. You have to learn how to hear your intuition, guys. It screams, but only for a second, and then logic starts to come in. That first voice. It does know. Alright. We don't call it hot foot in the mountains either. To us, it's uprooting people to make them leave and never return. Although some prefer to stick to tradition, these roots grow and change. We can honor and trust in the strength and support that they gave through the racism, genocide, and persecution of our old folks suffered. Through the troubles, they preserved the knowledge and practices that helped make everything bearable and gave our ancestors an upper hand against the trials that held them. These hills have been soaked in blood, covered with bones, and have resounded with cries of war and birth over and over. They've witnessed life and death occur more times than our minds can comprehend. Their soul has been strained by the blood of soldiers. Their soil has been stained by the blood of soldiers and slaves alike. These same struggles have given rise to our culture today in the form of tradition, folk songs and folk art, and good cooking. Our weather and seasons and landscape shape the way we farm and plant, the foods we hunt and grow, and the remedies we created for ourselves when the mountains locked us in. But it wasn't just with us that the mountains did this. They've been shaping the culture, practices, and magic of people as long as they've been inhabited. Even long before the Cherokee put down roots here. Very likely, the land of your folks did the same to your family and community. History here is weaved into the spider's web. I think it would be woven, but I'm not sure. The river runs warm with the paranormal. I love that. This author is good. I'm really a fan of Jake Richards so far. The river runs warm with the paranormal, and witchcraft whispers on foggy autumn mornings just before the church bells start ringing. Let's now turn to the superstitions and tales of these hills. Those bedtime stories that may have root in echoes of haints in the graveyard. What is a haint? H-A-I-N-T. Y'all, tell me what a haint is. Echoes of haints in the graveyard. I'm guessing it's a ghost or a spirit. And chills when an unseen guest is knocking at the door. Superstition is the fuel behind folk magic. Of course, we don't think it to be primitive or backward. It's what the old folks always did and said. So we do the same because they got along with it. Personally, I can validate the most of these tales are true. Superstition finds its spot nestled around the needs of humanity, whether it be food, weather, hunting, childbearing, or labor. It guides us from accidentally bringing ill onto ourselves and offers protection from the same from others. It is there in the pit of those needs that mountain witchcraft is healing, that mountain witchcraft and healing is born, cultivated, and preserved across generations. That's fantastic. So now let's, so come back to the next video. We're not ending this video. But in our next video, now we're going to do a discussion. And I'm going to interact with the people in the chat. And this is how I've chosen to do this audiobook chapter by chapter, if you will. These ones, when I did the chapter audiobooks, they were all just uploaded. I did interject my opinions, but again, you guys, I've done all these books chapter by chapter, uploads, not live streams. But next chapter will be Down Devil's Run, Stories and Superstitions, which I'll be reading today. I'm so excited to get right back to it. However, it will be on the next video. Now let's talk. Let's do some discussion on this chapter. Let's talk about what we learned so far on the Appalachian folk magic, the history, the terrain, the weather and the seasons. Those are all the things that we talked about. How old it is. I mean, what are your guys' feelings? This is just so amazing. Do we remember the 5 states that it is in? Does anyone remember the 5 states? This book is awesome. It is. And I've heard it's just sold out everywhere, or at least over in the UK they're having trouble getting it. That is why I'm here. And again, if you guys want to become a patron, the link is below. My Etsy shop's below if you want to support me that way by purchasing something from me or asking for a custom witchcraft order. I have oil lamps. I have 7 different oil lamps right now. I sell Florida water soap. Those are big sellers. I sell sage but my Etsy's down below. Check it out. Sage and Palo Santo and juniper berries, all my 3 favorite cleansing things, in an abalone shell. Right now I have like 10 abalone shells. I have over 300 herbs. I sell packages for readings. Enough about me. Let's do the chat on the book. Okay. You can join my Patreon for as little as $1 to $5 a month. And that's the last thing I'm going to say. Hey, Tangerine. Hi, Tangerine Layla. So Mountain Butterfly says, such an amazing book. I absolutely agree. Ricky says, I'm further away from the Appalachians than I thought. I'm closer to the Catskills. I heard the Catskills are up in upstate New York. Catskill. Or is that a town called Catskill? Alright, now, what were some things that stood out to you in the reading? What were some of your favorite things that you absorbed and that you loved? And let's talk about that. So please, everyone, try and contribute at least one thing. from the reading that you would like to share that you absorbed, you know that you can use or that you will be using, that you added to your Book of Shadows. There was quite a few things that I asked Nello to add to our Book of Shadows. So very, very excited. What were you guys so excited about? And do you remember the 5 states? I'm going to have to think of a clever way or some kind of, what is it called, an anagram to make out of the words to remember them, or a mnemonic device or something. So, From the Dark Pool says she really enjoyed seeing the differences with similarities with British cunning magic. Yeah, we were talking about how in the very first part, it says here, when the mountains first formed during the time of Pangaea, they covered half the world. And this is talking about the Appalachian Mountains. When the land of Pangaea broke apart, it carried remains of this mountain across the globe, forming the mountains of the British Isles, the Scottish Highlands, Scandinavia, and the Little Atlas mountain range of Morocco. This may explain why the Scottish and Irish immigrants felt so at home there. That's really cool, and one of my things was so big that's stuck in my head is that these hills are thought to be around 5 million years old, where the Himalayas are only 40 million years old. So that is just really cool. And also, if you were in the Appalachian Mountains, I feel like you could connect with people over in the British Isles, or people in Morocco, Scandinavia, etc. So let's see. Ricky says Kentucky, Tennessee, West Virginia, North Carolina. Close! The 5 states are, ready? Tennessee and Kentucky, North Carolina, West Virginia, and Virginia. But we're going to think of a way to remember that that's clever, and as soon as I do it, I'll let you know it. I gotta sit down and make a mnemonic device or an anagram or something. Crazy. Yeah. How about you, Madam Butterfly? What was your favorite thing that you grabbed from the reading that you were, like, either going to practice or excited about, or it's new information, or... I was interested to know that, you know, in Appalachia, a lot of times they would just use salt and black pepper for their hot foot powder. But I mean, again, you use what you have, and sometimes that's like the most common thing, and it's all about intention, right? Learning about their traditions, yeah, absolutely. Fantastic. I also really liked finding a little bit more about how this author, Jake Richards, has been writing. I'm liking the way that he paints a story with his beautiful words. The difference with regular hoodoo. Yeah, definitely. Definitely some differences. And they're not saying the word root work a lot. So, you know, the differences between Southern root work and Appalachian conjure or folk magic from Appalachia. Yeah, absolutely. So, anything else y'all want to talk about before I start another video on Chapter 2? Is everybody prepared to come back for some really fantastic Chapter 2 superstitions and stories reading? I know that we did a little bit of reading from this on the channel because I was excited about this, but we're gonna, of course, like we say, read it from start to finish. And how many... Let me tell you what you would be expecting in the chapters. Wow, it's long, huh? It's a long one. Alright, that's what she said. Okay, Chapter 2, Down Devil's Run. Stories and Superstitions. There's an intro, you know, that's there for a while. And then it goes into Superstitions and Charms, Witches, Protection, good luck, bad luck, healing, marking and mirroring, birth, labor, and childcare. And that's it. But I think the birth, labor, and childcare, I found some really interesting things. And the things that are interesting to me are like the aborificans. Joyce says, I love this book. Gotta get a copy. You do, Joyce, you do. Alright, y'all, so I'm going to go ahead and give my voice a break, drink loads of water, and probably come back in about half an hour and read Chapter 2 for y'all before 3 o'clock hits and my landlord gets here. Alright, see you soon, about half an hour, and we'll read Chapter 2, Stories and Superstitions, from the book that everybody is craving. Again, I do this all for free. I don't monetize. I don't make money off of my channel. So please check out my Patreon below. I've also made a video that you could look up called The Taxidermy Witch's Patreon, a Witchcraft Patreon like no other. And I take a half an hour to explain to you the benefits. But I make each tier a piece of my taxidermy and all of that. And you can support for as little as $1 to $5 a month. And also, my Etsy shop is down below, so if you need anything made, I specialize in like cool chicken's feet and decoupage art and invisibility workings and oil lamps, all kinds of things, you guys. Whatever you need, just ask. Whatever your wildest imagination can come up with, we can put those dreams together, and we'll both be scratching our head at how cool it is. I'm really working at making back scratchers out of these things. I'm really trying to make that a thing. Alright guys, love you so much, and I will see you back for Chapter 2 on Superstitions and Stories. Bye!